Salutations to the nations, Angel Knots.
Angel Knot.
So today we're going to be reacting to a video by Shump Junkie, and it is titled Gaming in the 80s and 90s. And that should hit home for me because your boy is an 80s baby, you know what I'm saying? So I probably grew up playing a lot of these games. You may have as well. Let's get to it.
Want to know a secret? The real reason that gaming during the 80s and 90s was so magical, why we still can't stop playing the classics today, and get so nostalgic over things like old game cartridges, print magazines, and classic arcades. Yes, the games were incredible, with the birth of nearly every popular franchise we continue to play. But the games are only part of the story.
Did y'all have an NES? Did y'all have an NES? Go ahead and put what console you had as a child, your first console, in the comments.
Imagination, famous comic arcs that made you dream big, morning cartoons that had you glued to the TV, Dungeons and Dragons on weekends, riding your bike clear across town to the game store just to get a glimpse of what new.
What game store did you guys go to? I went to Funko Land as a kid. Yeah, that was the main one, Funko Land. Oh, those are good times.
Games they had. So much was exciting, and the memories we created, now over 30 years later, still haven't been forgotten. Whether teaming up with friends to take down Magneto or leaving them behind to die under the waterfall, being a kid was both wonderful and messy, as it should be. We shared our love of games and talked trash, whether standing shoulder to shoulder at Street Fighter cabinets or elbow to groin on the basketball court, argued over console superiority, only to then bring our stash of games with us for weekend sleepovers so we could all share and play them together, or at least let them watch. It wasn't.
See, that's something that this generation isn't going to get to truly experience, man. Like playing split screen 4-player 007, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you can to a certain extent with a lot of the Switch games are multiplayer, couch co-op 4 players, but it's just something so nostalgic about that, you know what I'm saying? Like Halo, the original Halo, like getting down, man. Y'all kids don't know.
Wasn't just about the games or movies or any one thing. It was the connections we created while enjoying them together. Not that we didn't play alone. We sure did. Late into the night when we could get away with it. Some of my greatest triumphs were on my own, but it was always followed with sharing that triumph with others the next day. It's that sense of community and shared passions we had that created the magic. What kid were you? The one with all the magazines that everyone wanted to come over and read? The one with.
Y'all remember Game Informer, man? I had a subscription to that, man.
The rare, unique system that nobody else in the neighborhood had, and others came over to play? The one with the parents who made all the amazing food and would feed you and your friends whenever you were over? The game master that others would bring their games to, needing help, or just watch with excitement and envy as you conquered farther into a game they just couldn't complete. Did you grow up in a country where Sega, not Nintendo, ruled the roots during the post-Atari 8-bit generation? Or were you the computer geek, cobbling together your own PCs and playing games like Wolf 3D, Wing Commander, Eye of the Beholder?
Hey, so shout outs to my dad, you know what I'm saying? Rest in peace. But he had this like before, like everybody just had the internet in their house and stuff. My dad had like 4 PCs, okay? And he had them all hooked up in different rooms, networked together. And we would play Duke Nukem and Doom and what was the other one? Rot. Yeah, and we would play them all in different rooms. Man, that was super dope, man.
And Monkey Island, upgrade.
That was so rare back then. Like now, we just take for granted how easy that is. But back then,
RAM and sound cards to play the latest. We were
especially whoa. I kicked my I kicked my computer chair down. Um, that happens a lot in this chair. Anyways, but yeah, that was especially rare, like in a black home back in the days, man.
Mesmerized by new
In any home, but especially in a black house. Well, my dad was like a computer geek.
technology, quickly becoming bigger, badder, better, and often not very affordable. Most had to choose a side, then draw our lines in the sand and defend that choice with our honor, if it was even our choice to begin with. So sharing our games, systems, and everything else was a matter of necessity, even if sometimes borrowed games quietly became part of someone else's library. Imagine an era where nearly all of gaming's classic franchises were born, when legendary developers like Konami, Capcom, Taito, SNK, Hudson Soft, Sega, and Nintendo created popular characters and experiences that remain iconic today. The very first Contra that had us practicing the Konami code.
What was your Contra? What Contra did you grow up on? I was Contra hardcore, okay, for the Sega Genesis. See, I had a Super Nintendo, but at my mom's house, I had a Sega Genesis, and it was Contra hardcore all day.
Trying to finish it co-op with a friend, the unforgiving brutality of the original Castlevania.
It is so hard to play retro games without save states. Like, I don't know how I would get even decently far as a kid in these games. Because now when I play them on emulators, I'm like save stating all the time. You can say what you want about me. I don't care. Save state, save state, save state, gang.
No codes or passwords, starting over from the beginning until you finally figured out the tricks to beating some of its hardest bosses, finding the best route through the original Mega Man to make reaching and fighting each boss manageable with the best weapon, or the engrossing adventure of the original Zelda and Metroid games, with the ability to
Up,
save your game and slowly
up,
progress, even take it
gang.
on the road and play with friends.
I love Metroid so much, but I'm Super Metroid. That NES Metroid with that black background, I cannot do that. I cannot do that. I'm sorry, but I love Samus. I love Metroid.
I'll never forget opening the original Final Fantasy box for the first time and uncovering a full-size, color map of the world that I was about to spend nearly 100 hours exploring. Mario went from a single-screen arcade-style scorefest to an action platformer, then
Auto
to a
left on.
full-fledged adventure of its own with a map and endless secrets to uncover. Some of the home ports turned out even better than their arcade originals. Ninja Gaiden went from a beat 'em up to one of the greatest action platformer.
Wait, wait. Yo, I know I'm gonna make some mad with this statement, but Ninja Gaiden started as a beat 'em up? I had no idea about that. I had absolutely no idea that Ninja Gaiden started as a beat 'em up. I got introduced to Ninja Gaiden from the Game Boy. Um, I had no idea it was a beat 'em up. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Of all time, known for its split-second timing and unforgiving difficulty. Bionic Commando became a full-fledged adventure with
I
branching
love
paths,
Bionic Commando.
story,
Or
and a
tough.
bloody, fantastic
Oh,
surprise
oh,
ending that Nintendo's American censors clearly missed. The very foundation of what console gaming would become started here, and playing games of this depth and caliber for the first time ever was nothing short of a revelation. Although sometimes nothing short of a trip to hell and back, because a lot of these games were maddeningly hard. Designed to give our parents their money's worth and a handful of whoop ass to us. We had to cut our teeth on some of the most brutal games, and living to tell the tale was a badge of honor. More importantly, those of us that persevered through some of the era's artists and their trial by fire experience prepared us for a lifetime of challenging games.
I feel like this is gonna sound wild to say. I feel like hard games forget a lifetime of challenging gaming. I feel like hard games prepare me for life. Like seriously, man, just knowing it's like so many life lessons that can come from playing games. Like don't give up, try again. As soon as things aren't going to be easy, you're going to have to be moving to the next level. Like it's so many life lessons in games, and especially can be equated to older games, because they are so daggone difficult.
Of course, it didn't hurt to have a little help from great magazines with tips and tricks to fall back on, strategy, maps and walkthroughs, and even cheat codes. Playing with power meant playing with an advantage, because Lord knows we needed it. And when all else failed and hope seemed lost, it was the latest issue arriving in the mail or guide hidden at the newsstand, ready with a strategy that would show us the way. No other console generation can lay claim to launching the vast majority of famous franchises like the 8-bit systems from Nintendo and Sega.
I can't think of character, any characters of this generation who are going to be as iconic as the ones that came out in the 80s and 90s. Don't get me wrong, just off the top of my head, I can think of some iconic characters. Um, let's see. Shovel Knight, Hollow Knight. It's a lot of knights. Um, Shovel Knight, Hollow Knight, um, Cuphead, they're pretty iconic. Who else? Who else can I think of? I can't think of any characters that are iconic as obviously Mario, obviously Sonic, Kirby, Zelda. I'm sorry, not Zelda, Link, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Mega Man. Like these are iconic characters. I can't even Hollow Knight and stuff as popular as it is. Like, can you call it as iconic as Super Mario, as Sonic? Like, they were doing they were cooking in the 80s and 90s. Crazy.
Yeah. The early 90s took gaming to the next level, and unlike the 8-bit years, the competition was fierce, with both Sega and Nintendo pulling out all the marketing stops in their war. No matter which side you chose, blast process, or playing with superpower, you had an amazing library of games to choose from that upped the ante in every way. But what's often lost in all the console war reporting is that it wasn't really a war at all. At least, not like today's culture. Yes, it was a competition, like the Lakers versus the Celtics, or the Bulls and the Knicks. We got into it, compared stats, and gloated when our port was the best. But at the end of the day, we were cool. We all played each other's games and systems. No matter which console you owned, you weren't missing out on the rival games, playing them too. And
I remember when I was younger, I had a Super Nintendo. That's what I grew up on. Later on in life, like I said, I would go to my mom's and I would play the Sega Genesis. But in my neighborhood, I had a Super Nintendo, and then my friend Zach, who lived down the street from me, rest in peace. Um, he had a Sega Genesis, and then my friend Sean across the street, he had a Sega Genesis. Get this, hold up, get this, with Sega Channel. Sega Channel, do y'all remember that? Did you? If you had Sega Channel, please write it in the comments because it was freaking amazing. And also, I know you were a kid, so you didn't have to pay for it.
damn, was there a lot to play. Nintendo had the best RPGs and adventure games, one of the best Contra, Castlevania, Zelda, and Mario games of all time. When it came to gorgeous pixel art and system exclusive killer apps, Nintendo was hard to beat.
Slide from your blades.
Sega had the best arcade ports and action games, not to mention a sports behemoth and a heck of a lot of shoot 'em ups too, some of the best of the generation. Killer exclusives like Treasure's Gunstar Heroes, not to mention its own Contra and Castlevania sequels, the Shinobi games, and some of the best co-op experiences around.
That's that.
Even the TurboGrafx 16, which failed to take hold in the
Yo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis games are going to hold up with their graphics until the end of time. There's something about pixel art that never looks old, you know? Like PS1 didn't hold up, PS2 didn't hold up, PS3, even these graphics that we look at today that look like photorealistic are not going to hold up like 20 years from now. But this artwork, people are copying it today, you know? Like
US, but
it's beautiful, man. I love pixel art.
exploded in Japan, including over 100 shooters to enjoy. And if you were lucky enough to have a friend that owned one, you got to play that library of shooting games too, along with the greatest Castlevania of the generation and other incredible CD games, the very first of their kind. Over half the console's Japanese library, more than 370 games out of nearly 700, were on CD. Or if you were really lucky,
Man knows that.
you actually had a friend with a Neo Geo, or even owned one yourself. Most of
didn't.
us, we could only dream of such a thing.
I remember. Oh, and I would I
And to top it all off, we also had arcades.
and then there's
What was your favorite arcade game? The one special cabinet you just couldn't pass by without
What was my favorite arcade game? Street Fighter 2.
tossing in a quarter. Was it a fighter, a platformer, a beat 'em up, or a shooting game? Did you play it with friends? Anyone that grew up during this era knows that arcade cabinets were everywhere. Not the generic big box arcades of today, but all unique spaces, along with every plaza, liquor store, laundromat, and pizza parlor. If there was a free corner, you can bet there were some cabinets. Many of the most popular games slowly found their way home, but arcades were more than just a way to socialize and play games together. They were a place of wonder and discovery, where you'd wander into your local.
Oh my gosh, man. I feel so sorry for this generation. Like, I'm not even trying to be an old head, but we were spoiled. We were legit spoiled. We didn't even know what we had. We didn't even know. Oh my gosh. Like, I remember there was a mall called Northwest Plaza here in St. Louis. And when you were going to the basement, there was a an arcade called the Tilt. I don't know if that was a franchise or not. Maybe they had them where you was. But you would go down, it was called the Tilt, and it was a whole arcade setup. Like, oh my gosh, the memories I have there. The last time I went to the Tilt, I got kicked out because I had a clown mask and I was chasing random random girls or random people around. I was a kid. Leave me alone.
hotspot, not only to find your favorites, but with an anticipation of what cool new games have been added. The very first time seeing and playing Capcom's Strider was a near transcendent experience, with a creativity of stage layouts and gameplay never experienced before. Jumping into the pilot seat of Afterburner, a freaking amusement park ride of a game, with visuals and kinetic gameplay impossible to match at home, ultra-wide, multi-screen, multiplayer beat-em-ups of our favorite cartoons or comics, and of course, shooting games.
And that's six.
The genre that literally
Marge was hitting people with a vacuum cleaner. Could you imagine getting hit with a vacuum cleaner in real life?
really blew open the market with Space Invaders, but now cranked to 11 with some brutally tough yet engrossing games like Gradius, R-Type, and Flying Shark, classics that would influence the genre for the next decade. And while popular in the West, it was Japan where they thrived most, where arcades were filled with shooters of every kind and long lines waiting to play them. There was no other genre that better distilled the essence of arcade gaming, as friends and strangers gather round, seemingly in awe of the mastery on display. There was nothing else like it, and once you'd been hooked, there was no going back. Every trip to a new arcade was the possibility of a killer new game being found, games so numerous and often obscure that many are still being discovered today that had previously been lost and obscure. That many are new game being found, games so numerous and often obscure that many are still being discovered today that had previously been lost to time. Yes, arcades were amazing, and again, a magical part of the era. A magic that, like all good things, wouldn't last forever.
Yo, I am so sorry, you guys. I did not realize that that I was covering up the names of some of these games that he's been showing. So I'm gonna move me and we're gonna keep it going. Sorry, I gotta run it back because I saw a game that looks super dope. Hold up.
Like all good, amazing, and that had previously been lost to time. Yes, arcades were amazing, and again,
I'm so sorry I was covering up the names of these games, guys.
magical
But like I said, the video link is gonna be in the description for the original video. So if you want to go back and take a look.
part of the era. Yes, arcades were amazing for today that had numerous and often obscure that many are
Alligator Hunt. Okay, that looks dope. If you've ever played that in the, please tell me in the comments if it's dope, if I should download it, or if it's trash. I'm probably gonna download it anyway because it looks super.
are still being discovered today that had
That dude,
previously been often obscure that
gotta
many
look
are
that dude's on a skateboard doing flips with a backwards cap, busting at aliens or something
still being discovered today
on a skateboard.
that had previously been
That's so 90s.
lost to time. Yes, arcades were amazing, and again, a magical part of the era. A magic that, like all good things, wouldn't last forever.
So, like I said, it sucks about arcades not really being around, not being as prevalent as they once were. But there are arcades, depending on the town you live in. Like there's one called the Up Down here in St. Louis. I believe that is a franchise, and it has like a bar and stuff. And this is like a dope, genuine, like a real arcade. Like not knocking like Dave and Buster's and stuff, but playing phone games like on a huge TV, like that's no, no, no. We're not trying to do that, okay? We're not doing that. We talking about some put a quarter in to play a game, and then they got like a bar area set up.
As the 32-bit generation kicked
Don't be getting drunk though.
into high gear, and home ports began to replicate the arcade so accurately, Playing at home was both convenient and cheaper. And as new genres like the first-person shooter emerged, the arcade experience was slowly left behind and faded away.
It's sad. It's like a double-edged sword, you know what I mean? Because we love the home consoles, but at the same time, they killed the arcade. So
Where there once stood a Street Fighter cabinet, now just an ATM machine, where we once gathered to
how
play
boring.
games for hours, was replaced by a mattress store. And with those arcades
How
gone,
boring.
so was a part of our childhood.
Right for at arcade.
Mhm.
Great music was the soundtrack to our lives, making the ordinary extraordinary.
Gaming music is so dope. It's so dope. Nintendo, as I'm speaking today, as I'm recording this today, Nintendo just released an app for specifically to listen to their game music. I downloaded it. It's called Nintendo Music. Let me know if you want me to do a review of that app. But yeah, gaming music so cold.
And boy, did the 80s and 90s have some incredible music. We grew up with Michael Jackson, Madonna, Def Leppard, Aerosmith, and Metallica.
One.
No matter how good the movie or how great the game, the soundtrack provided the atmosphere and personality. And in the gaming scene, it was the start of our love affair with chiptunes.
There's people who play chiptune music, like legit play chiptune music. Like I saw in an MKBHD video where he was taking a retro look at the Game Boy, and there's people who like play the Game Boy as an instrument, like have multiple Game Boys set up to like a sound system and stuff. It's pretty nuts.
Just hearing any of these classic melodies instantly brings back memories of not only the game itself, but the times we shared playing them. Every console had their own signature sound, which any of us could pick out in a heartbeat without ever seeing the game. The shooters played a prominent role, with classics like Gradius and Thunder Force having some of the most memorable soundtracks in gaming history. We were also there for the advent of CD games, which just
And they were, before he gets to the CD games, they were doing all of this music with such limited space, like megabytes or kilobytes of space that they had to work with, which is insane.
blew our mind, with the music and compositions suddenly possible, enthralling us for a time with the new technology. The PC Engine was the first console out of the gate, producing some of the most memorable CD game soundtracks of the era.
How long did it happen?
But once the dust had settled and CD became the norm, many of us still pined for the programmed chiptunes of old and those earworm melodies they produced. It was a snapshot of the early years, and to this day holds far too many memories to ever forget. What makes one a gaming junkie? Is it simply a passion for the art and entertainment? Or was there more behind the scenes? The answer is complicated. For many, gaming was simply that, enjoying them in every way we could, an exciting new medium to explore that was finally coming into its own. It was fun, and it was a healthy part of our lives. But with all the nostalgia and hindsight, it's also easy to lose perspective and imagine a perfect golden age where all was right with the world. Of course, that's impossible. Childhood was, and is, as much about learning painful lessons and growing as it is fun and games. And for many, games weren't just a passion, but also an escape. An escape from the trials of childhood. Games became a matter of survival, a way to disappear into an engaging fantasy world that at least temporarily relieved our suffering, a way to become the hero or heroine of your own imagination.
Yeah. He got deep. Yeah, that's big facts. It was a rough time in the household I grew up in. My parents got divorced when I was in, I think, 5th grade or something like that. And I definitely escaped into video games. And then I also got bullied as a kid. And I would go home and play video games. And as an adult and now as a follower of Christ, I say it's good to enjoy things, also have like a mental vacation, but now you want to find, I recommend escaping into Christ and into his word because it brings much more healing and you're able to deal with your problems instead of just escape the world. But video games did help get me through a lot of hard times as a child, for sure.
While truly memorable, the 80s and 90s weren't always kind to kids. Being a nerd or a bookworm wasn't cool yet, but many of us were. What happens when games become more than just games? When they become a way to save us from our own childhood traumas? And don't kid yourself, no pun intended. We all had them in one way or another. How many were bullied on the playground, so they disappeared into gaming the moment
Just
they came home, suppressing that rage that comes with being
he
picked
reacting
on?
to my
The
video.
games
Yeah.
themselves told us that winners don't do drugs, and the war against them was at its height. Society hadn't yet accepted that the drugs weren't the problem, but simply another escape and a way to feel normal. There are so many ways that we used games to cope, to find common ground and connections, or simply to survive. For some, games became an addiction, and in turn, we became junkies. I often ask myself, why do I truly collect so many games? Sure, there are a handful that are true nostalgia, but so many? How many simply own the games, just sitting on display? Or do you feel alone in your hobby? What are some of us saying with our collections, with our posts on Instagram or Twitter? Yes, we're sharing a passion, but I see something deeper. What I see is a yearning for connection that was lost when we grew up. The child in us saying, hey, check out my games. Come over. Play with me. Because it's not just the games that we need, it's each other, the connections that we've lost. And no amount of games alone can bring it back.
So I have a lot of thoughts as far as the come over and play. They need more multiplayer co-op games. Like Nintendo should not be just carrying the whole couch co-op on its back. Okay? They need way more couch co-op games. Yes, online games are good too. I'm not saying do away with those, but split screen games, people uniting, coming together, even if it's, and as an adult, you don't get to really hang out with your friends and stuff as much when you married and have kids and start having responsibilities or more responsibilities. But even for times like Christmas and Thanksgiving and stuff, when people come over, like there needs to be more options out there. Do you think you're a gaming junkie? Do I think I'm a gaming junkie? Um, no. I would say that I'm not a gaming. Maybe this is coping, as they say. I don't think that I'm a gaming junkie because games isn't what I think about all day long. Um, I play games throughout the day, but it's not like something that, oh, I can't wait till I get back to it. I can't wait till I get back to it. I think that's how junkies act. I don't know.
So what happened next? We grew up, of course, but not before riding through the most technically innovative era of the last few decades. The next generation didn't just bring arcade-accurate ports, but true polygonal gaming and vast 3D worlds that we'd never imagined possible. Adventures became more epic, horror more realistic, sometimes a little too much so, and portable gaming became as important as playing at home. The console race went from 2 or 3 to several competitors. Games became a global force to be reckoned with. Now, there were losses along the way. Sega
You see how
faltered,
Laura
global
Croft
force to be reckoned with. Now, there were losses along the way. Sega faltered and was eventually pushed out of the market, and their incredible innovation went with them. Shooting games lost popularity, first becoming a niche market for the most hardcore of players, and then nearly disappeared altogether. The very best developers, whose games and sequels we once agonized to play, closed their doors and made way for a new market and style of gaming. Time marched on, and change was inevitable. For all that's changed and what was lost, today we find ourselves in another golden age, a modern age that's made rekindling memories of our childhood a reality.
Hey,
A modern age that's
Right.
made rekindling memories of our
I just bought that Iron Meat. That's probably that's my most recent purchase. I bought it because I was like, oh man, this is dope. This is like Contra. It's like a couch co-op that me and my wife can play together. So I played it by myself, and I looked and saw the heads were exploding and stuff. I was like, yeah, this is too gory for my wife. She's not gonna play this. So I played it with my cousin.
our childhood a reality. Companies like Sega, Natsume, and Tatsujin Corp are making a comeback, bringing back classic games and releasing sequels that do the originals justice. Big boys like Capcom and Konami, who moved on and modernized long ago, often leaving us behind, are slowly coming around and putting resources back into the retro market. Indie developers, many like us who grew up during that era, are producing new games that often perfectly capture what made our old favorites so memorable, and doing it better than most AAA developers ever could. Even shooters have made a tremendous comeback with
See what's dope is, yeah, you got Capcom and stuff, but these indie devs, they're the kids that grew up on the games. And so now they're old enough to have their own businesses and know how to code and everything. So it's like love letters being sent to their childhood since they grew up on it. It's dope.
old games and new being released at a record pace we haven't seen in decades. New games for our old 8 and 16-bit consoles, spearheaded by some of the legends of the industry. If you told me this would happen just years ago, I wouldn't have believed it.
And that's like who's dead, right?
And it's not just the games that are back. Anything you miss can now be found. That Trapper Keeper from grade school, the Garbage Pail Kids you collected, even the fake cigarette candy that
That's crazy. I was just on eBay thinking, do I want to collect Garbage Pail Kids cards? And I was looking at them and I was like, these things are disgusting. I don't want these.
they'd sell us out of the ice cream truck. Okay, let's be honest. That's just ridiculous. Our favorite cartoons and anime on streaming, the comics we read accessed from anywhere, even the transforming mask toys can be found if you look. Fire away, baby. Synthesized music that brings back the feels, being resurrected by talented artists like Zach Vortex, whose music you've been listening to featured in this video, creating a perfect atmosphere for those late nights,
Oh,
working
Zach,
on the computer.
you mean
These
copyright strike?
games, movies, toys, and more have value beyond a price. Whether they conjure joyful memories or remind you of painful ones, they were and are part of our life. I'll say that again, our life. None of what we cherish most would amount to much if it wasn't for those we shared it with. Those are the connections that created the memories, the not-so-secret secret that created the magic. Share your passion with others. Remember the past, but live in the present. Create new memories sharing your old favorites with a younger generation. And if you're ever feeling old, just remember how awesome a time it was to grow up. What an incredible time it was to game, and you'll remember why. You wouldn't give that up for the world.
Our
So, what would you little maniacs like to do first?
Yo, that was dope. I remember I was talking to a fellow believer one time, and he was like, he thinks that God put video games here to show how cool he is. And I totally agree. All right, yo. So if you want to check out another video and you want to see why I think that Pokemon Legends Arceus is the second best Pokemon game of all time, click this video right here.
Angel Knight,